Lora, great to be in a chat with you this afternoon.
Yeah, it's great that we've got some time to spend some time
together.
chatting.
It seems like we never get time. What we like to do is put together a set of webinars for our parents and for interested parties, especially people who are in the homeschooling community, to give them some insights into how we approach things at Evolve, but also to give them some practical advice that they can use in their spaces. And hopefully through doing that, we will create an entire community of learning. And we also want to hear back from parents in the comments, what worked for them from what we said, and also what they would like us to talk about in future, maybe.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea. Yeah.
And also what advice they could give each other. So this is the start of a series of homeschooling focused webinars, where we want to create some community with our own parents and also with parents in the homeschooling world, which can be quite isolated. I thought I'd start with growth mindset. I think growth mindset is the basis for our entire understanding
Definitely our school, yeah,
of how learning works. Okay, because the question we would answer there is, what do you think? How do you think learning happens? What is your view, and why would you homeschool your child? What is it that would lead you to make a decision not to have your child at a traditional school? I know you've engaged a lot of our parents. Do you want to elaborate maybe a bit on that and say what you think our parents have said to you about why they've chosen?
I think there's a lot of different reasons, and I think that it comes down to their child struggling in a social setting, to a child that's not stimulated enough, that they feel that they need to be working at a faster pace, families that just want to be able to have a bit more flexibility in when they learn and how they learn, and that they don't have to always just stick to what we do, that they can supplement it a little bit if they want to, or not. And I think that there's a lot of different families, and I think that it's really interesting to actually have a conversation with lots of them, because
and really
invite
people in the comments to share with us some of the ideas or some of the reasons why they've chosen to homeschool. I think it's also true that in the homeschooling space, there's a automatic anxiety that builds up around, am I doing the right things? Is my child performing at the right level, etc., etc.? And is my child going to be ready to write a matric exam, or is my child going to be ready for the world of work? And that's where service providers like Evolve Online
definitely, so that they know that they're at the right pace and the right standard of work, etc. And I think that lots of parents are also, they've taken on this journey sometimes when they're quite young, and then to try and transition their child back into a traditional school when they're used to the flexibility. I think that's where they want to give them the best, but they don't want to give up what they've got. And I think that's where we are happy medium, because they don't have to give up what they've got, but we do help them with the standardization.
You get to an IB matric and you get into university,
the best of both worlds.
You get the best of both worlds. So growth mindset, just for our viewers, growth mindset is a concept that is gained in popularity and in general public interest in the last decade or so, and it's based on this scientific belief that your neural pathways are not fixed. So there used to be a belief that at certain times you would be able to learn, you would be open to learning, like when you're a toddler and then when you're a teen. But what they're actually finding is that you create new neural pathways all the time up until the day you die. And so to say to somebody that you have a fixed intelligence or a fixed ability to learn things is not true, but it was widely believed. And the growth mindset practitioners say, when we say that that's not true, it leads us to that conversation of, well, then what can be accomplished? And I thought we would focus on three areas. I think we would start with the neuromyths. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about how learning works. There are a lot of popular science ideas that I want to tackle some of the most popular ones and explain that actually what neuroscientists are saying to us and what they're learning through their research is none of that's actually true. The second thing we should look at is growth mindset itself and how you would apply that. What does that change about how you think about your learning.
Yeah.
And then finally, let's look at some practical so what's. How would that change if I'm a homeschooling parent or a parent, and instead of looking at my child from a fixed mindset but from a growth mindset point of view, how does that change the relationship between us, and how does that improve the relationship between us?
And I think having those conversations, and I think when you've done previous webinars, I think that's what most of the parents have commented about, is the practical application, about how to have a conversation about their reports, how to actually deal with certain situations, because I think having a child with you all the time, it does bring a different dynamic to the relationship. And I think that you want to encourage them, you want to inspire them to learn, etc., but you also have to be a parent. And I think getting those two right is a difficult balance.
Yes.
And I think that's where having the science behind it, I think, makes a big difference to understanding of what's happening.
Helps better. So let's tackle these neuromyths. I want to look at left brain, right brain. I want to look at the idea of pink brain, blue brain, and then the biggie is this concept of learning styles, okay? Because that's like one of the most popular concepts. There are a few more, but those are some of the most popular concepts. And if we look at left brain, right brain, left brain, right brain argues that one half of your brain deals with the creative and the other half of your brain deals with the analytical, okay? And as our understanding of how memory works and how memories are performed in the brain. So one of the big changes is this belief that memory isn't stored, memory is performed. Okay. So once you have a neural pathway, it's the neural pathway for a memory, but that neural pathway has to fire for you to have that memory. Okay. So what is stored is the pathway. And in fact, a single memory is an amalgamation of multiple, can be hundreds of thousands of neural pathways. Because when you were learning that thing, or when you were having that experience, you may have been smelling something at the time. You may have been hearing something at the time. You may have been with someone at the time. You may have been reading or watching a video at the time. All of those aspects are embedded or encoded into the neural pathway. Now, if I'm learning the number 3, on a particular day, in a particular moment, the circumstances are all embedded in the neural pathway. If I learn the number 3 again on another day, it's a separate set of circumstances. It's a separate set of neural pathways, but they are interrelated.
Yeah.
So when I want to remember 3, I've got to have something that starts the pathway to fire.
Yeah.
Okay. And it might be one of the things I used, like the picture of 3. If you think about a typical test, they will say, what number is this? The fact that you're seeing that number that you used to learn is what fires the pathway. Okay. But what that's taught us is that your memories and your knowledge and your abilities are actually scattered all over your brain. Any single skill, any single memory can actually be scattered both on the left and the right side of the brain, because there's audio centers, there's visual centers, there's these sorts of things. So it's not true to say that when one half of the brain fires, suddenly this is the behavior that you can see. The danger of all of these things is not, there's kernels of truth in all of these things, because there are 2 hemispheres in the brain. Okay. But the danger lies in the fact that people start to label themselves.
And then they don't want to almost engage with other mediums or other things because they believe that
I'm a left-brained person,
so therefore I can't be creative.
So therefore I'm very creative, so therefore I can't be analytical. And if you think about the creative process, there's a lot of structure, there's a lot of steps to follow. I can't just sit down with a paint and whatever and a canvas and suddenly I've got to think about.
But I'm even just thinking about data and how people represent data these days. So, I mean, how creative is that? So, it's just definitely not
it's analytical information
that's created a
in a
creative
visual
way,
form. So you're actually absorbing analytical through the creative.
And I think also all the stimulus that we're getting all the time, I think that it's pushing us to actually use both sides of our brain. I don't think that anybody is comfortable and I think that makes us grow as well.
It's impossible actually to only use one hemisphere of your brain.
definitely, yeah.
What is interesting is the research around the Corpus Callosum, which is the bridge between the two hemispheres. And there's a lot of information coming out around the density of that, and the more links that exist between the two hemispheres, the higher your level of analytics and creativity. So it's not
whole brain people.
It's about, because if you think about it, if you're storing some of the pathway or some of the aspect of the memory in pathways on the right and some on the left, the question is, how do I bring those two things together? And the answer is,
is there a traffic jam?
Yeah, is there a traffic jam? Good point. Also, some of the barriers to learning are placed in that. One of the things that they have experimented with is cutting the corpus callosum to prevent epilepsy.
And what does it?
Now, well, it does have an effect, and I'm not informed enough about it to speak authoritatively, but what I remember from my reading is that it doesn't stop a person who was creative from being creative, or it doesn't stop a person from who was analytical from being creative. It's a misfiring of the neurons between the two hemispheres through that causes the epilepsy.
And it's obviously also the memories that might be not those neural pathways that aren't being able to be accessed anymore.
You can't eliminate a portion of your brain without having some impact on you. So there's that. Okay, so that's this whole concept of left brain, right brain. Now the next concept is called pink brain, blue brain, and this is this belief that girls and boys learn differently.
That's my pet hate. Yeah.
Well, let me give you a rant opportunity. Why do you not hate? Why do you?
I've always been a bit of a feminist, so I don't believe that there is a male and female brain. I think that it's again maybe your neural pathways that were built up when you were little, that you weren't expected to play certain games or do certain things, and in all of that, it also builds up that fixed mindset rather than...
It is another form of fixed mindset. I like to hear that. I wouldn't describe you as a feminist. I would describe you as a critical thinker and a scientist. Okay. It may be that feminism was the cause, but the truth is you've hit on the core issue that brings about the myth of blue brain, pink brain. And it's got to do with with a lot of these myths, there is some kernel of truth, there's some stereotype. And people who believe these things will point to that stereotype and see, but boys are all better at engineering and girls are not, or whatever it is. Okay. And it's exactly that. There's this huge debate in psychology around nature, nurture. Okay. What part of what I know or am able to do is based on my inbuilt, what I inherited, and what part is developed through my community. I know I'm talking to you, but I'm talking to our community listening to us. So what we find is that really from an incredibly early age, children get genderized. They get exposed to stimuli that create the neural pathways, and those stimuli can be gender-specific stimuli. The boys get the doctor's kits and the girls get the nurse's kits. If you looked until quite recently at a doctor's kit, it always had a boy picture on it. Now, there's a very interesting podcast I listened to. It was a young couple, a mixed-race couple, and they had made a conscious decision to bring their children up gender-neutral as far as their beliefs are concerned. And chosen for when the baby was born yellow and colors that were not traditionally related to a particular gender, made sure there was a wide variety of toys, of both traditionally boy toys and girl toys, and then the baby was prem and had to be in the intensive care. So they were able to decorate the incubator, so they had their yellow blanket and yellow cushion, and the child was dressed in a yellow grow, and they were at this place, and the nurses said to them, look, you guys are exhausted, go home, get some good rest, we'll look, your child's in great hands, we'll look after her, and then you can come back and have strength again tomorrow. And when they arrived back the next day, the nurses had changed everything to pink. Okay. And what the mother said, which stayed with me, is the fact that when she listened to the tone of voice and the kind of words that were being spoken, within this pediatric emergency unit, ICU unit, when a nurse or a parent was talking to or about a boy, they would use phrases like, he's tough, he's strong, he'll survive, he'll pull through, okay? And when they were looking at a girl child, they were saying, she's so gentle, she's so fragile, she's so... And she was actually, because there is data that shows that premature boys are more likely to survive than premature girls. But the kind of common wisdom has always been that's just because there's something about boy physiology that makes it possible for them to be more robust. Absolutely untrue. And her view was it's actually in how that child is cared for, that there's a subconscious bias that actually can affect this sort of thing. So my big thing about homeschooling, and it's one of the big things about homeschooling, is that parents, because the minute you send your child to a school,
all those things
it
come
doesn't
into play.
matter what you've done.
Yeah, all of it comes into play.
Those gender biases come into play, those gender issues come into play. The children genderize the children.
Yeah, because actually if you now have your best friend that does X, Y, Z, you want to do the same. And if they're a very girly girl, they might influence your
boily boy.
Yeah, your neutral child that's now got some other issues.
I mean,
to
they spoke about that. They spoke about when their child went to preschool and came back and now wanted to play with dolls.
Yeah.
But had never desired to play with dolls before, or had played with dolls as easily as they played with their Lego.
Yeah.
But now suddenly they wanted to preference girl toys. Because of that reason. So it's a fascinating sort of
and even the adverts and things like that.
Everything they're exposed to in society genderizes, and it's actually impossible not to have your child exposed to genderization.
Yeah.
But you mustn't start to believe
that's
because they're a particular gender,
I agree,
it therefore creates limitations or possibilities for them. And the big one, which is learning styles, Gardner's learning styles. For a long time, this thing has started to take hold that I'm a visual learner, I'm a kinetic learner, I'm an auditory learner. I'm sure you've encountered that in your schools.
Definitely, and I think a lot of teachers still refer to these styles. And I think it's just lack of carrying on with their research, and I think that's where these type of podcasts are very important, because actually hopefully they're listening and they can also pick up some hints and tips. And I think that it's very true that yes, there obviously are some type of preferences sometimes, but again, if you focus on one thing, obviously you're going to get better at it, so therefore you're not improving the other parts of learning. So therefore, if that's your seen preferred style, you obviously would always tend to go towards that, and you would never influence yourself in learning other ways.
And that is the problem again. It comes back down to labeling.
Yeah.
Because label equals limit. So if you label yourself or are labeled as a visual learner, then you actually have a reason for why you can't learn something. Oh, I can't learn that, I'm a visual learner.
Yeah.
Or, oh, he can't learn that, he's a visual learner. Or, no, we've got to change this to a visual learning. Or, he couldn't learn it because we didn't present it in a visual way. Again, what the latest research is showing is that all people learn in all ways. Okay? And it's sometimes easier to learn certain concepts in a certain way. So I might learn mathematical concepts more easily kinetically.
Yeah.
And you might learn mathematics concepts more easily, visually.
Yeah.
But you also learn those concepts kinetically, and I also learn those concepts visually. And there's this cognitive concept of interleaving, which argues that you should integrate different kinds of stimulus, that you shouldn't try and learn something in one way only.
And again, that comes back to your neural pathways, because only if you've only learned it in one way,
you've created a single neural pathway.
And then you don't have any other options.
No, and if you don't get that stimulus, that neural pathway doesn't perform.
There we go.
Therefore, I can't remember it. Yeah.
So I think that's where actually having lots of different ways of remembering things, actually it does help.
Yeah. I have a cartoon to show people where growth mindset first started to challenge the status quo was around this concept of IQ. Okay. It sort of in the 1950s particularly, IQ became very popular. It answered the question, can we measure intelligence? Can I know how clever somebody is? I mean, I even remember watching a podcast about this woman who was claimed to be the cleverest woman on earth. She had a 200 and something IQ.
Yeah.
Okay. And the minute that started the interview, she said, that's rubbish. I can't be the cleverest woman on the earth. Not everybody has done the IQ test, and I'm only the cleverest woman by this measure.
Yeah,
there are other measures where I might be the stupidest woman on earth. So she really is the cleverest woman on earth if she understands that.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was this thought that I could put a number to your intelligence. And that was the start of the downward spiral of fixed mindset. Okay, because it starts to get to the point where you say, okay, that person only has an IQ of 100. So we better not put them into advanced mathematics because they're never going to be able to cope. And there's this lovely story, I think it's true, of a teacher who moved from the east coast of America to the west coast of America. And after a couple of weeks, her principal called her in and said, you really have to share with us how you guys approached mathematics on the East Coast, because obviously the way you teach it on the East Coast must be different from and in America, each state has its own education board and can have its own style. And this teacher said to her principal, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm teaching I don't see a major difference in the way I'm teaching. Of course my kids are going to be doing well. They've got such high IQs. And the principal said, I don't know what you mean. So she showed her principal the class list with the IQs on it. And her principal said, no, those are their locker numbers. And it goes down to this thing about
your expectations.
Your expectations. Yeah. Children will always live up or down to your expectations. So growth mindset is based on a couple of things. It's based on the understanding of neuroplasticity, the variation of experience, and then I can talk about the asset list and the importance of failure and why most scientists get science wrong. Neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to rewire itself. Okay, and this field really grew out of research into Alzheimer's. So what they found was that the neurons stop working. Okay, and they don't replace each other. They don't get replaced. I won't go into that, but what they discovered was that there's a particular chemical that every time you use a neural pathway, it deposits that chemical, which is what creates the permanence of that pathway. And that during adolescence particularly, the brain goes through a pruning process where another chemical loosens that or dissolves that chemical that's been laid in your brain, and your brain starts to get rid of all the neural pathways it's never used again or doesn't need again. And it sort of, because the brain is a very low energy organ, it doesn't have a lot of energy, and so it's designed to not think. Your brain's designed to stop you thinking. Okay. Your brain's designed to allow you to learn to follow routines. It's the things you don't need to worry about, because you don't need to remember you don't have to think about where the indicator is in your car. You have a neural pathway, you just automatically go there. And that means you're not using energy.
But it's like when you see a picture from the past, and sometimes you couldn't even remember going there until you've seen that picture, and then all of a sudden it sparks a memory.
It's performing that memory, yeah.
But you actually, if you'd asked specifically about that, you wouldn't have remembered it until you've seen it.
But it's inefficient, as I understand it, to have lots and lots of neural pathways that you never use, because it doesn't allow for that routineness of your thinking. Okay, so of course, what we have to understand then is, if the brain is designed to prevent you from thinking, then you've actually consciously got to take action to think. And then the other thing you've got to realize is you're going to get tired very quickly if you think too long, because the brain is a low energy organ, and it uses up its energy very quickly. And so the brain goes through this process of pruning away the unnecessary neural pathways, and it does it by releasing a chemical that dissolves the chemical that kept the neural pathways in place, and you get to rebuild your neural pathways. Okay. But it doesn't only happen in adolescence. What they've discovered now is this is like an ongoing process, and one of the reasons for Alzheimer's is that it stops happening.
Okay.
So the brain doesn't keep forming neural pathways. Okay. And then there's other stuff around the link between neurons that chemical deteriorates,
yes.
and so the brain, the memories just don't perform. It's actually where they came up with this concept of memories of performance, it's not like a hard drive where you've recorded stuff. Okay,
you just can't find it.
I just need to find the file. I can't find the file. That's not how the brain works. Okay, so they are now obviously interested in, can we stimulate that in the brain? Can we, where a person's been in an accident, a portion of their brain has been damaged, can we create neuroplasticity in the brain so that those pathways, like I can't walk anymore because that part of my brain is damaged, but now I can rebuild my walking ability because I can repurpose a part of my brain. There is effectively no difference between the matter or the particular white mass in one part of your brain and the white mass in the other part of your brain. There's, it's not, that's why that left brain, right brain stuff is such nonsense. Okay. So that's neuroplasticity, and it's the basis of growth mindset, because if you believe that the brain is fixed, then
what I learned, and I can
I'm never going to be able, or I don't do maths. That's a great one. I just don't do maths. I'm no good at maths. Well, why are you no good at maths? Because you're not making the effort
to practice and to
with our taxonomy of learning, there is the self system. So it could be that I don't believe, it's the self-efficacy, I don't believe in my maths ability, or I get stressed when I look at a math sum, so my emotions prevent me from learning. So it doesn't have to
be... And again, that then goes back to memories and how you feel about something.
Correct.
So
correct.
Having somebody cause trauma during that...
whacking you on the hand because you got your times tables wrong is a good way to create the wrong self-system for learning math. So, and that's important, and if our parents at home were to take something out of that, it's make sure that your children don't get into the I can't do statements. I just don't do statements. Okay, I may not want to do, I may choose not to do. I may not feel interested in doing. The other thing in the self system is relevance. I don't see how this has any importance in my life. Okay, whereas fortnight,
much more.
So much more important. Okay. And so the thing is variation of experience. It's about if maths hasn't worked for you that way, maybe there's another way that maths can work for you.
And create new memories and new neural pathways.
If you think about our design though, and if you think about how our maths teachers, and you are a maths teacher, how our maths teachers approach this, Ashley is always keen to say, here's a video, but there's 60 others that you could watch. And if this didn't work for you, go and watch another one.
And again, all of those different ways are, some of them's just using numbers, some of it's using examples, some of it's using just telling a story.
Correct.
And I think that's where maths has changed a lot over the years. I think that's, if you look at a matric exam paper now, it's linking it to the real world. And I think that's always been, as you said earlier, the relevance issue. It's like, that was the big question, is why do I need to learn this? Why am I learning this? And I think that if people understand where it fits into their real life, they are more keen to be open to it, and there isn't that block. And
I've got to put my 2 cents worth in for maths literacy at this point, because I do believe that there is a diminishing of maths literacy. There's a belief that maths literacy is a second child, a second-class citizen to maths. If I can't do maths, I do maths literacy. And unfortunately, that's the truth of how it works out in schools. And a person who has a barrier to learning maths for some reason, whether it's because they don't believe it or because they're missing key information or have gaps in their learning, will do better at maths literacy because it's a different skill set, and that's my punt.
And it's very relevant to real life.
I mean, I'm learning how to work out the square area of a room that I want to tile, and then I take the size of the tiles, and I figure out how many tiles I need to buy.
Yeah.
I can see the relevance of that. That could have in my life.
Or working out your tax bill.
Working out your tax bill, whatever it is. But the point is, they're not testing the same thing.
No.
So they're not comparable. You can't say maths literacy is like lower grade maths. It's not. In fact, there's certain things that you do in maths literacy that a child is doing pure maths would struggle to do.
Exactly.
Because it's a problem solving thing that they've been taught in maths literacy, and that same problem solving skill is not needed in maths, and so it's not taught in maths. Okay, so it's a bit of a segue into that issue. And what's important for growth mindset is that knowing that you can get it wrong.
Yeah. And actually asking the questions why, and understanding why you're getting it wrong. And I think that that's where the reflection and all of that side of it comes in. That actually, once you've understood why you're getting it wrong, it's much easier to get it right. And I think that that's what we try and encourage. That's why we let our students have more than one attempt at something, because we actually want them to reflect. We want them to learn from their mistakes. They actually need to. I actually think that you engage more with something if you've made a mistake with it, because you actually want to understand where did I go wrong, what have I misunderstood, how have I read that incorrectly, what information have I taken in the wrong way, you know, like
what could I do differently?
Yeah.
The tyranny of marks is where most parents find themselves stuck. And unfortunately, this tyranny exists in the homeschooling circuit as well, because there are homeschooling products where what you're given is materials to go through with your child, and then the process for accreditation of your child's learning is your child writes a test at a particular point in time, you send that test in for marking, whatever mark they get is their mark for the rest of the year. Okay, and we have discovered at Evolve that we need to. There does have to be an end. There does have to be a limit in that redo process, because it becomes ineffectual, or it becomes counterintuitive, or doesn't have the desired impact. If there's too long a gap between when I did the thing and when I try and do it again, you need to try and do it again as quickly as possible. That feedback loop is so important.
Very important.
And I mean, we measure both things. We measure how often does a child retry, and we measure how long does it take for our teachers to give that child feedback. So that's something about our reporting system that I'm really excited about. So with the concept of the importance of failure comes this idea that it's through failure that we learn. Not that failure is a measure of us.
Yeah.
Okay. If I get 60, if I'm in a traditional learning context, whether that's homeschool or brick and mortar, if I get 64 for my cycle test, I'm left with that 64 for the rest of the year. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, it could be true that you arrive at a level of competence in something in the first module of the year, and you choose not to improve that position. You choose not to, or it's good enough, because that's one of the questions up. When is it good enough? Okay. From our perspective, 65 and above is a competence level. Only when you get to 80 do we say you've mastered the thing. Okay.
Yeah,
So
we just hope that our doctors and people that actually are performing surgery on us, for example, aren't just competent, that they have exceeded mastery.
Yeah, but I would be satisfied with a doctor who's competent in understanding the way your circulation system works, but has mastered neurology.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to have mastered everything there is to know about the body.
But his specialization.
But he must at least be competent in how the circulation works. I would be very unhappy with a person who's just competent in neuropsychology, neurology, and has not even embarked on learning about the circulatory system.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of balancing. So at a subject level, we're expecting mastery.
Yeah.
But if you go granular and you go into the subject, there can be competence. There can even be people who are just at an advancing level in certain things, as long as it's not mission critical to future learning.
Yeah, and I think that's how our systems have been set up. That we've got our key points, and that's why often our learning is more skills based rather than content based. So actually remembering what the ancient Egyptians did is a very small part of it, whereas learning skills of how to make notes or how to write an essay about it or something like that is much more important, because the skill is the more important part rather than the actual content, because Google is our friend and we can actually find out all content these days without much effort.
Yeah, but we can have the ability to find that content without the
interpret it
skill of knowing
how to take that
how
information,
to use that content, or if that content is actually good content or not.
Exactly, and I think that's more important. It's those skills are much more important than ticking the box that I've learned about the Egyptians and the Romans and
the pyramids.
Yeah.
But even taking your Egyptian thing further, it's more important to know how the impact of the Egyptian dynasties influences the world we live in today.
Yeah.
You know, that's and can I learn anything from that I can apply to my life today, which is exactly what you've said. And I also find that it's interesting to know that, okay, so we're saying that in our system and of the system, but obviously this podcast is targeted at people who may not want to use our system or don't choose to use our system. So the takeaway for a parent listening to this or watching this is, do the diligence of understanding that what the curriculum you've chosen believes about failure.
Exactly.
And in terms of what you've said, check to see how much of what my child is expected to perform is just remembering stuff, and whether or not I'm actually penalized by giving my child the ability to look stuff up.
Yeah.
So if I'm saying to parents watching this, if you're homeschooling or not, but because it applies both ways, that failure loop that you described, okay, what advice are you giving to parents about how you can build, for people who may not know, metacognition is thinking about thinking. It's about that ability to think about your learning process. So what advice are we giving parents as far as their relationship with their child? How would I approach failure if I'm a parent now and my child has now come with a test and they've got 64 for it?
And I think that that's the big jump, and I think that that's where it's important that parents are actually seeing the bigger picture, that actually it isn't a set in stone thing. Yes, maybe if it's their final matric exam, then
well, that's just too late.
It's too late. Exactly.
Okay. It's not too late actually, because you can rewrite.
Exactly, but it's something there you needing to have that conversation where it doesn't build up barriers. I think that having the conversation and actually making the child open to reflect, to learn from their mistakes, to actually have the conversation about where do you think you went wrong, how would you do it better next time. I think that those conversations are very important, because those are how they learn, whereas if you just yell at them for not achieving, it's building up barriers and making them believe that they can't do it. And I think that that's even harder to break down than actually being encouraging and supportive. Obviously you don't want your child to fail, but I think that sometimes
no. We want our children to fail the first time. We don't want them to fail
as an overall result. That's what I mean. But I think that it is important to actually have those loops, because I think children that are constantly succeeding never learn how to deal with failure either. And I think that that's also part of the learning process of actually being able to reflect, being able to be a bit disappointed about certain things, and actually having the drive afterwards to actually get it right and to try and improve. Because I think if it's too easy sometimes,
seriously important.
And I've seen it with university students, that students that were A students sometimes are the ones that don't perform as well at university, because they haven't got that staying power. They haven't got those skills of being able to reflect, learn from their mistakes, and have that resilience as well to a certain extent. When the stakes get higher and they get more difficult, you need to have those neural pathways developed in order to be able to to actually be able to cope with that, and how to deal with it, and how to resolve all of your conflicts within yourself, I think, as well.
And that whole loop, that what happened, What insights can I gain from what happened?
Yeah.
What can I do about it? What's my theory?
And
What
it's
if
not
I
a
do this, I
personal
would do
thing.
that? No, it happened.
Because I
It's
think
not
that
because
sometimes,
I'm any
yeah.
bad. It's just because
But I think that sometimes that's how children feel.
yeah.
And sometimes that's how some teachers make them feel, or parents make them feel,
society
that it's actually
makes them feel.
the result is becoming them. And that's where I think that's where the children start being,
In
feeling.
my master's research about behavior management in schools, the one very interesting insight I got was, don't ever say to a child, you are disruptive.
Your behavior.
It's your behavior that's disruptive. Because the minute you are something, you're defined by it. It's your behavior is disruptive implies it can change.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, so there's that. So I talk about the 3 report meeting.
Yeah.
So you start with, you get your child's report and you look at it on your own and you get over yourself. Okay. And you get angry about things that you think your child should be doing better at, and you get excited about the things that your child is doing brilliantly at, and you analyze that report from a growth mindset point of view, and you say, these words are so important. If parents could just take away one phrase from this webinar, it would be, oh, how interesting.
Yep.
Oh, how interesting. That is so interesting. Not, oh, my child got 64%. Oh, how interesting. She got 64%. Okay. That's interesting for all kinds of reasons. It might be interesting because last term or last test, she got 55. How interesting. Something's going right. Can we analyze that? Can we figure out what's different? Or, oh, how interesting. She got 64%. Is that the limit of her capabilities?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the first one. You've got to not go into these meetings with your children emotional. Okay. Because that leads to all kinds of downward spirals. Okay. So that's the first part of the report meeting. The second part of the report meeting is the celebration part. That's where you come home with Krispy Kreme donuts and you just focus on the good, and you see your child did brilliantly at a particular thing and you say, show me. Bring your books. I'm so excited by this. I want to see what you've done. Or you tell me when you look at your report, what are you most excited about? Mom, look at this comment my teacher made. I'm so excited that my teacher said that about me. Or look at this, Mark. It was because I had that project and I really enjoyed that project. Well, show me. And let's eat our Krispy Kreme donuts at the end and let's go to bed.
Yeah.
And then the third meeting is the roll up your sleeves and get down to it, is the metacognition meeting. Okay, so this is interesting. What can you learn from this term's work? What can you learn from this week's work? Whatever the frequency of your meeting with your child is. And I do advise, because with our live reporting system, I do advise that while you're starting out, you do it more frequently, and also if your child's younger, you do it more frequently, and then they get to be teenagers, and then you've got to do it more frequently again. But the whole point is that that's the growth mindset moment in the report meeting. I've spoken. I think we've reached the time limit of what we're doing, but we can speak about soft skills and how important it is for children. You've spoken about it already. Note taking is more important than where the pyramids were built. And then we've spoken as well a little bit about the Mazzano, the self system. This comes from our taxonomy of learning, which is called Mazzano's taxonomy. Robert Mazzano developed it. And it's this idea that it's not just about how difficult is the question, but it's also about, can I think about how I learn this stuff, and also how do I feel about it. I'm going to end there, and I'm going to ask you, if you are a parent in the room, because I know you've got kids and you've got some young ones and also some older ones. What is the one thing about growth mindset, as you've become more and more familiar with it, that you've applied in your own home?
I think especially with the little ones, it's having that reflection. And I think that's getting them to bring their cycle test to you and having them explain where they went wrong, and understanding where they are actually could have done better is much more important than analysing the marks. And I think that's where the difference is, that there's not a focus on the marks. I think that that to me is more important, that you're actually understanding what I
The
could have
learning.
done better
The learning.
and where I could have done better and how I could have done this better, rather than what is the final result.
Yes, because in growth mindset it isn't final.
No. And I think that is important, because I think that for so long children have been focusing on their final mark, and the first thing they ask you is this for marks from a traditional school, when you actually are giving them something to practice, or you're giving them something a task to do, the first question is this for marks? And it's like, no, we're just doing it because we want to learn from the experience and we want to be able to develop skills. It doesn't always have to be for marks.
I think that what you've just said is so important, because I wonder how often we get that question in our school. I would suspect we don't get that question very often.
Yeah, again, because they can do it over and over again.
But also it's never not for marks in that sense.
Yeah.
It's not for marks, it's for life.
True.
Yeah. Thanks so much for giving me your
excellent.
time.
Thank you.
Folks, thank you for taking time to watch us and to engage with us on this issue. You'll see I'm happy to take questions. Please, in the comments, ask your questions, give us your views, tell us what you think about
give
this.
us some of your experiences.
And share some of your experiences with us. And if you do choose to follow one of the practices we've just spoken about, tell us how it went. Tell us if it worked for you, and give us that feedback.